Hey everyone, thanks for checking out the Private Lenders Podcast. Chris and Jason here. As always, the podcast is sponsored by our Mastermind group for private and hard money lenders, hardmoneymastermind.com. Go check it out, create a free account, join the conversation. All right, so today we are talking about loan economics and how much money you want to make. So if you're familiar with the famous book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey, he's been famous in business and life type of books for decades now. One of the 7 habits is that you begin with the end in mind, right? And how that applies to this is how much do you want to make per deal? Instead of just, I want to lend money, I want to lend private money, I want to do deals, I want to, lend to X volume. Let's start at the end, right? Let's start at the end and see what kind of profit we're going to be making per transaction and back that into everything else we need to do, like leads and closings and volume.
Yeah, and although this is a scalable business model in general, you might not want to grow it to be gigantic. Obviously, the more deals anybody does, the more headaches they have, the more staff they have, the more exposure they have, the more risk they have. And that's fine if you want to utilize this as a gigantic business, but it doesn't necessarily need to be. And there's still a lot of money that can be made, even if you're doing, a few deals a year. It still potentially could be. So instead of worrying about deals and units, worry about the economics of it and how much money you're making or how much money you do want to make, like Chris said. And let's start with a breakdown. In general, we make our company generates about $10,000 for every loan that we do. And we'll break that down for you. Typically, we're lending, upwards to close to $200,000 a deal, right? You already probably are aware that we lend out at 13% and 3 points, right? So, and this is assuming other capital investors. This isn't even assuming our own money. The money per deal is significantly higher when we use our own money. So let's just assume it's a completely outside capital investor that's deploying money through us. So it's 13% and 3 points, right? So let's say it's a $200,000 loan. There's $6,000 there, plus another $1,000 or $1,500 in some miscellaneous commitment fee, evaluation fee, inspection fees, things like that, plus the servicing income and RUB that we're getting. So if we're lending it out at 13% and the investor's getting 10%, we're getting 3%, that's $6,000 annualized. Average life of our loan, what is that right now? Maybe 7 months, give or take, 6-7 months. So there's an extra few $1,000s there. So there you have it. It's $10,000 per deal without even using our own capital in that particular case. And it's a good kind of metrics to work off of because you don't necessarily just need to keep doing deal after deal after deal after deal after deal. That's not the goal.
Yeah, I mean, one of our favorite parts about this business model, possibly our, number one favorite aspect, is the amount of work that goes into doing a deal and the profit that comes out, right? Like compared to other business models that we've been in over the years. I mean, we've mainly been in this for, 14 going on 15 years now, but we've done other stuff too, right? Like we've brokered some loans here and there, stuff that's outside of our wheelhouse. We've owned rental properties. We've done some flips. We've done some wholesales. Like have been getting more into equity type stuff on bigger properties. And still, like we have not seen a better model based on that kind of metric right there. Like how much work goes in, how much money comes out, right? So when people are in private lending, but they're missing a lot of that, that's what we're trying to help with, right? That's what we try to help with at the Mastermind and on the podcast and everything else. Like if you're brokering loans for a point or two on that same $200,000 loan, you're doing $2,000 to $4,000. That's a fraction of that 10,000 number that we're talking about. And you're probably, especially if you have, a small team, a little bit of help, you're not talking about a lot more work. You're just talking about a better model with more income.
Yeah, and it's also one of the reasons why we're anti-institutional back capital, because that's just a fee shop. It's just might as well just be a regular mortgage broker or mortgage lender back in the day. The margins are so slim on those. There's only so much you can make, right? If you're lending out at whatever 9%, you're getting the capital at 8%, plus you're charging a point, so you're at 9 and 1 just to be competitive to do lots and lots of deals. Well, guess what? You know what happens when you do lots and lots of deals? You have to hire more employees. You have higher marketing costs. You have more exposure, more risk, more headaches, right? Like that's not why a lot of people want to be in business. It's not why a lot of people want to be private lenders or hard money lenders. So it doesn't matter if you're using your own money. It doesn't matter if you're utilizing other capital investors. This is the formula, and you can back it out to where you want to be at. Instead of stating, I want a certain amount of money deployed or a certain amount of units closed. I mean, all those are fine. You got to strive to hit those. But it's really working backwards based on the money. And, you can control how much you want to charge. I talked to a consulting client recently, and they were saying that, I want to think the best way he explained it. He was like, I'm short on capital. I've been deploying all my capital, but I want to figure out a way to make more money on it. Should I try to go raise some more capital? I'm like, up your price. Like, you don't have to lend out at whatever the market rate is or whatever we're lending out at 13.3. Lend out higher if you want to. If you have, let's say, $2 million of your own money to deploy, and you never have money sidelined, you're probably lending out too cheap, or you're probably not doing good enough.
That's a good point.
Doing good enough deals. Up your price. There's nothing wrong with that. And another example of this is if you're in a lower price point market. So let's say your average loan is $50 or $60 or $70,000. Charge a flat fee instead of 3 points, because 3 points on a $50,000 deal is $1,500, right? There's just not enough money to be made on that. You have to do so many of them over and over and over. Charge $3,000, $4,000, $5,000. Charge some sort of flat fee instead, so you're making a certain amount of money. We typically look at it as we're trying to make at least $10,000 per transaction. That's typically how we try to back it out, give or take, because we know that it's the same amount of work on a smaller deal than a bigger deal. And there's an argument that a smaller deal is actually more headaches, which is a different conversation.
That's a different conversation, although very true. But yeah, I mean, different ways you can control that capital too can increase that spread. Like, we pay our people 10% and we lend at 13 because that's what they want. That's what we're okay with. That's what we're able to lend at. The spread is good for us. It's a little over 80-20, a little over 20% to us. And they're happy getting the 10. And that's just kind of what we're used to, but you don't have to do that. Like, you could raise 8% money.
Yep.
You could definitely raise 8% money.
Especially
and you could lend
right
at 12, right? You could lend at 12 and there you go. Your spread goes from 3 to 4, like our model to yours. Like, you can easily do that. And those are spreads that you control, that you make. Another thing that's going to happen this year, and another reason why we don't love the institutional capital model, is that the cost of that capital will change. In all likelihood, we have rate hikes coming from the Fed, and that is going to affect the cost of that capital for that capital provider and wherever they get it from big credit lines and whatever else, on down the line to what they charge you, because they're going to set that price. You won't be able to be like, no, we're at 8% last year, we're staying at 8% this year. It's like, no, now our money costs 8.5 or whatever it might be, right? So that's just the spreads and the cost of the capital you don't control. On the private capital side, just like I was saying, you are in 100% control, right? Like, people will want your stuff at 8%. And I think that we could go get a chunk of new money at 8% if that is something we wanted to work on. So yeah, I mean, build that model, look at the economics, see what you want to make first, and then back your lending into that kind of profit model.
Yeah. And I think so many people just kind of go first and they don't think through that. And next thing they know, they're stuck in this trap that they can't get out of, right? Because they're known for lending out cheaper capital. They try to get as much market share as they could. I mean, we've never been in this situation, but I would imagine it's hard if you've been lending out so cheap for a long period of time and you have repeat borrowers that are coming back to you, and all of a sudden your prices are going to go up more and more and more and more. Like, you probably end up losing that business. I remember we had a podcast that we did a few years ago with a pretty well-known institutional back lender out of the Philadelphia market. And, I don't want to say they were envious of our business model, but they didn't fully understand it until we explained it, because they were like, well, we're trying to lend $500 million. We're at $100 million right now, and we can scale with it. We can do this. We'll make more money that way. And we're like, yuck, that sounds like brain damage between all the employees that they had, all the overhead they had, marketing and things like that. And it was just doing deals and deals and deals and deals and deals. And it was like, you look on a per deal basis and it was just minuscule how much money they were making on a per deal basis. And they're in a trap. They're stuck. All their capital investors have bought into this model. all of, it was a crowdfunding. It was a leverage crowdfunding company, right? So they raise money from the crowd and they leverage it up. I don't know if they put in any equity themselves, but the point is that's their business model, and that's all they know. And it's, I don't want to say it's unfortunate. Hopefully it works for them, but that's not something that I think we've ever wanted to be involved in. And I believe that everyone listening to this probably doesn't want to be involved in that either. I mean, I remember a few years ago, we had one of our local mastermind groups in our office, and one of a buddy of ours, he's a home builder, and his magic number is he wants to make $1 million a year. And he was the first one to jump up in front of the room. He's like, listen, if I could do one deal a year and make $1 million a year, I'm freaking out. Right now it takes me a ton of deals to get close to that. So it's not just about doing lots and lots of deals. It's about making kind of the most that you can with what you already have in place.
Yeah. And that's the great thing about this model is that you can control it, right? Like you don't need to take the private lending business and turn it into the regular conventional mortgage lending business, right? We've been in that before we started HMB. It's not great. The rules and the parameters of the profit is all set by somebody else. And then you choose to play in that game or not. And that's what a lot of these people are doing instead of creating the rules, the terms, everything else themselves, which is historically speaking what the private lending business is and should be, right?
Yeah, no, exactly right. So
yeah, I would definitely like to continue this conversation in the mastermind. For anybody listening now, if you don't have an account already, go create one at hardmoneymastermind.com. I would be very curious to hear everyone else's loan economics in terms of the stuff that we just broke down, like average loan amount, what are your fees, points, interest rate, your servicing spread, and what you're trying to hit from that per unit thing, right? Like, so we're doing $10,000 per, and we're trying to do 100 loans and make $1 million.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And one of our buddies that lends and has a decent amount deployed, he's always looking to achieve interest rate returns. He's trying to achieve a certain interest rate return. Personally, I understand it, but to me, that's not the best metrics, right? Because you do a $40,000 deal and you get a ridiculous 100% rate of return on your money, then you leverage it, it's even higher. I don't think that's the best metrics. I think it's dollar per hour, dollar per time, dollar per risk, whatever it is. I mean, let's remember, there's still real risk in these deals. So like Chris said, I agree. If you're listening to this and you're already a member of the Hard Money Mastermind, and if you're not, join the Hard Money Mastermind. It's free. Share with everybody how you're currently structuring things, because there's no right or wrong way to do it. It's whatever works best for you. I mean, there's a lot of folks who've reached out to us before wondering why we structure things the way we do. And we're simple, right? We don't want to overcomplicate things. This is the way it is. And I'm curious what other people are doing.
Yeah, so we're going to post this video in the mastermind as we always do. If you're hearing on audio and you want to see it on video, you can always check it out there. And then we'll put the question in, right? We'll type out our metrics of like, here's what we're trying to hit. Here's where our 10,000 per unit comes from. And we'll see what everyone else is up to too. So if you haven't already, go check it out at thehardmoneymastermind.com. And we will see you next time on the Private Lenders Podcast.